Bum bum ba-dum bum ba-dum bum bum ba-dum bum bum ba-da-dum bum ba-dum bum ba-dum bum bum ba-dum bum bum.
Welcome to Everyday Musicality, the podcast in which we discuss all things related to Gordon's music learning theory and how it can help unlock the inner musician that lives inside of all of us. I'm your host, Heather Shouldice, music educator and faculty member for the Gordon Institute for Music Learning. In this episode, I have a conversation with new GIML faculty member and one of the co-authors of a new book on choral applications of MLT, Dr. Krystal McCoy. Hello and welcome to the Everyday Musicality podcast. I am getting super pumped because in 2 weeks, less than 2 weeks actually, I will be traveling to Germany because I was invited to give 4 separate presentations at a German conference for teachers who are interested in music learning theory. The theme of this event is called Building Musicianship Through Audiation, and again, I'll be giving 4 presentations. So if there's anyone listening who's in Germany, I hope to see you in Mannheim on October 14th and 15th. I'll link to that event in the show notes in case there is anyone in the area who might want to check that out. Also, I've been rushing around trying to take care of just all kinds of projects and work before I leave for that trip, so I haven't had a chance to stay caught up on email. I did receive a really thought-provoking email from a listener who wrote in about one of the musical examples I shared in the last episode on subjective tonality. She had a little bit of a different take on one of those recordings than what I had demonstrated in the episode, so I am looking forward to sharing that example with you next time. I just didn't have a chance to get the recording pulled up and her email pulled up for today. Also, I wanted to make sure I let listeners know if you are a member of the Gordon Institute for Music Learning, otherwise known as GIML, they will be having their October faculty hangout on October 22nd at 4 o'clock Eastern Time, and that will be with new faculty member Hannah Mayo, who is one of our brand new piano faculty members. So if you're interested in piano applications of MLT or just MLT in general, and you want to ask Hannah some questions or pick her brain, ask her opinion on certain things, that is, again, October 22nd, 4 o'clock Eastern Time, free for all GIML members. I'll link to that in the show notes in case you would like to register. Before I get into today's episode, I wanted to also mention that we have a new giveaway from sponsor GIA Publications. This is a new book called Q&A for MLT, Choral Applications of Music Learning Theory, and I'll tell you at the end of the episode how you can enter to win a free copy of this new book, which is fantastic. And I have a special guest in today's episode who'll tell us about that book, and she is one of the co-authors of that book. Her name is Dr. Krystal McCoy. She is also another brand new faculty member for the Gordon Institute for Music Learning, and I'm extra excited because she is faculty in the brand new choral music strand. So we had our very first 2-week professional development levels course in choral music applications of MLT this past summer, and we are planning more for different locations in the U.S. next summer. So in today's episode, I talk with Krystal about that brand new choral track for the Gordon Institute for Music Learning's summer trainings. And I talk to her about the brand new book that I mentioned that you can win by listening to the end of today's episode. Without further ado, here's my conversation with Dr. Krystal McCoy. I am thrilled to introduce today's guest, Krystal McCoy. Welcome, Krystal. Thank you so much for making time to be on the podcast.
Of course. Thank you for the invitation.
Yes, I'm happy you're here. Could you start by telling the listeners a little bit about yourself? Who are you and what do you do?
Sure. So I have always been a choir kid at heart. And I've always been a singer, and I started directing choirs in high school. I was so blessed to have the opportunity to direct a church choir my senior year in high school. And I also taught 2 show choirs my senior year in high school. So I feel like the music ed path, it just naturally happened. I went to Bucknell University with a full ride music education to study music education. I was so excited. And I think the other part of the reason that I've always been a singing kid at heart are my experiences in honor choirs. We're so inspired by the musical moments that occur in an honor choir. So I've always been inspired to conduct too. So I got my master's at Westminster Choir College in choral conducting, where of course you get this world-class choral singing experience surrounded by choral nerds, if you will, under the direction of Joseph Flummerfelt. And so after that, I went and I taught high school for a little while, for 5 years. And then I was really fortunate to start teaching at the University of Delaware after that with my master's degree and my 5 years of teaching experience. I started at University of Delaware in 2006. And then training pre-service music educators became my passion. And that's where I feel like I really just lit up to not only sing myself and conduct myself, but to prepare future conductors of singers. And so I got my doctorate from Boston University, and I studied what it was to find meaningfulness in adult choral singers. And I was so lucky to work at Southern Utah University, was my first hire after my doctorate, and I was the director of choral activities there. And I still teach there. I've moved closer to home now. I'm on the East Coast, but I teach in their online master's music ed program. And it's allowed me some more time now recently to reconnect with what's happening in a K through 12 music ed setting and think about how MLT can transpire in a K through 12 setting. But then I get to share those experiences with my online master degree students who are out there in the world teaching. So I feel like I've come to a spot where I'm just so excited I'm able to share my experiences and to create new ones.
Excellent. And I always ask any guests that I have on the podcast, because I find this question to be fascinating, the answers that it uncovers, both in differences and in the similarities. And that question is, how and when did you discover music learning theory?
Oh, I think, as most people do, in my undergraduate studies, I had to learn all of the different approaches and methods and philosophies and theories of teaching music education, and you memorize all of those facts. So I think in undergraduate, I had memorized Edwin Gordon, jump right in, patterns. And then I passed my test. So that doesn't count. That doesn't count. So, I was at the University of Delaware, and my dear colleague, Suzanne Burton, invited Dr. Gordon to campus. And, but I will say, before that happened, before Dr. Gordon came, so I met him in person at University of Delaware, and that is where I was completely lit. But my students at University of Delaware were going through Suzanne Burton's general music class and learning, just getting a wealth of music learning theory information. And they were bringing that to my choral methods classes. And they were teaching rote song procedure when they would go to public schools, they were teaching rote song procedure in the choral class. And I thought, whoa, I have a duty here to learn what they're learning so that I can help them take the further steps to apply what they've learned in general music to the choral setting. So it was kind of a combination of meeting Dr. Gordon and knowing that my students needed me to continue their music learning theory journey. So I met Dr. Gordon at University of Delaware, and it was probably about 2007. So that was my start.
Neat. Yeah, I always love to hear one of the common themes among most, if not all, of the guests when I ask them to talk about how they discovered music learning theory. It's just like this complete surprise. Like they were going through life thinking, they were on one path, and then all of a sudden it just shaken up, turned upside down.
Completely, because here I was. Okay, I have my master's degree in choral conducting. I studied with Joseph Flummerfelt. I'm teaching, in a college position, I'm teaching music education students. And then I sit in a circle with Dr. Gordon and do an improvisation session. And exactly like he turned me on my head. I thought, where has this been, and how have I gotten this far in my studies and in my career? And that's exactly what happens. And it's this incredible but it's this incredibly inspiring and engaging moment. And it doesn't close you down. It just opens you up. That's what I love about music learning theory, is it provides this safe framework of musical events that occur that allow you to become your own musician. And it's, yeah, exactly. I agree with the people who say that.
Oh my goodness. I love that. I love how you just said it, how it just opens you up. It's that whole new world of musicianship that we never knew was possible or never envisioned in that way. Yeah.
I often, I watch the undergraduates in the traditional theory program, and that's a whole other podcast.
Yep.
That's like, so knowing what Dr. Gordon thought, I really felt like I was almost like a supportive advice counselor in undergraduate programs for the kids going through music learning the theory, because sometimes I think those undergraduate programs, they break them down instead of supporting and opening them up. And it's a little, like as an being on the faculty, I think you need that support person. So yes, that's the brilliant part of music learning theory, is it's supportive and it's empowering.
Yes, totally. I love that. And it's, probably rooted in Dr. Gordon's ideas about music aptitude and how we all have musical potential and we can all develop musical skills, and understanding that is strikingly different than, like you mentioned, sadly, that theory sequence oftentimes does break students. And I think there are a lot of faculty members who kind of see that as part of the purpose, to weed out the, the haves from the have-nots,
Yes.
which is so different from, how we view everyone as musicians in music learning theory. It's sad. And sad too that sometimes the skills that a music theorist might consider to be the important things for the haves are not always the skills that, shine in music learning theory. So there might be some kids that are weeded out who might have really high music aptitude and really good ears. And
They just don't have the
chance
support for those skills to shine yet, right? What do you
I
think?
love that word.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I was even thinking, as you were talking too, about what happens in the studios as well, especially in the vocal studio, because they can't memorize a set of fingerings, and so oftentimes the vocal teachers are, what's happening here? And really it's just a lack of the experience of audiation and being surrounded and yeah. So
Oh my gosh.
another podcast.
And just one last thing, just because you reminded me of what a jerk I was as an undergraduate, because I was an instrumentalist, right? I played clarinet. I remember doing collaborations like chamber music where it would be, like winds and a vocalist, and just the instrumentalists looking at each other like, oh, why can't they sing this part? Why can't they remember the pitches? Oh, these vocalists. When really it was just because their job was so much harder. We could just sit there and push the buttons and at least be in the right ballpark. Right.
Yeah.
So I just look back at that and go, oh, you were so wrong. You
Oh,
had
that's
no idea.
It's just amazing the journey that we've come to be able to know what's happening. Yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah, for sure. So you said it was somewhere around 2007 that you met Dr. Gordon, and then you went on to start in on your doctorate. And we met in, was that, I think maybe 2011 or 2010 at the University of South Carolina.
It was 2011 because my daughter, yes, was born in 2010. So she was 6 months old. And she's 12 now.
Wow. And that's kind of cool to see, like, this visual representation of growth across time. Yeah.
Yes.
Wow. Yeah.
And that was such a fortunate time for me, because I had you in the practical applications, which was such an inspiration, Heather. I mean, you're an incredible MLT model, and then Dr. Gordon in the mornings. So it was just a dream. That was a dream 2 weeks.
Yes, for sure. And that, I was just thinking back to that course. That was one of the last times I think that he taught in those summer courses.
Wow.
I think he did a little in 2012, and that might have been it. So how lucky were we to have that experience? Yeah, for sure. Well, I wanted to have you on today specifically to talk about choral applications of MLT, because there have been people for years who have been saying, this just makes so much sense for the choral classroom. Why is nobody doing this? And it has taken a long time to actually get some things rolling here in a formal way. So could you first talk a little bit about why you think MLT is valuable for the choral world? What do you think it brings to the choral table that other approaches or methods don't?
Sure. And that was that mind-opening moment when I worked with Dr. Gordon in that circle improv session. That's exactly what I thought is, wait, hold on a second. We're singing in 3-part harmony and someone is improvising, and this is choral. Like, that's what this is that's happening. I think that music learning theory, I know that by fostering audiation, you're working internally, and that is the number one job of what a singer must do in order to be to exist in a musical context as a singer. So I feel that the support and the development of audiation is choral. I mean, it starts chorally, and then the instrumentalist in the music learning theory world, then they translate that and they put it onto their instruments, whatever they're doing. But you will find in every path of music learning theory studies that we are all singing and we are all choral first, and then we go off and put it into our context. So I think the supportive audiation, it values most singing. So number one, that's music learning theory. The internal audiation coming out through your own voice is a singing choral thing that happens. The sequential approach to music literacy is so very important. And that is something that music learning theory gives in such a thoughtful and research-based way that you really won't find anywhere else. And the fact that it begins first with the performance, and then at the very end, you just tag in, and this is what it looks like. And then that's when the magic happens. So that thoughtful approach to music literacy coming from music learning theory, I think, is so important. Improvisation, as I said, because I think a lot of choral teachers, I know I did, carry a lot of guilt when you look at the national standards, right? And when you're taught, well, these are the national standards, and then you think, well, I teach choir, so because we've never had an improv experience, and that's once again a different conversation. But very quickly, I in high school, improv only happens in jazz band, and to be quite honest, I never saw anyone teach improvisation. They just relied on those that perhaps had higher skills and higher audiation to just create something, right? And they were probably listening to models. So it could have been those students, I'm only guessing, perhaps with a higher aptitude. But I never saw improvisation even be taught in jazz band, but that's the only place. I mean, every now and then you'd get a snippet of it in a jazz choir, a little bit of scatting perhaps, but the choral world, it's definitely hands off. So I love that music learning theory gives you a safe and a sequential way to start with creativity and then to start layering the skills that you need to improvise safely and in an appropriate manner, in a way that you're going to succeed. And I think that I know that music learning theory awakens the ears harmonically.
Yes.
And because it acknowledges that your internal audiation and what your monophonic, what you are giving, your musical line that you're sharing, well, it exists within a whole world of harmony, right? And so awakening the ear harmonically is a no-brainer for choral musicians. And it's so funny because this is one of those other things that you realize, oh my gosh, this whole time I've heard conductors my whole life, honor choir conductors, say, listen, listen, right? Listen and tune, listen and tune. But there was never any scaffolding or building of a sequential, like, how were we to know what the resting tone or the tonic of the chord were? Listen to what? So I love, it's like we ask for that as choral directors, but we don't know how to teach it and how to cultivate it. And so that also, I think, is music learning theory is incredible for choral musicians. I think that the other thing, I have so many reasons why. Music learning theory, I have so many reasons, is the fostering the audiation of rhythm and time and space. Once again, debunking the choral, I don't have rhythm, I'm a singer, right? Or like, right, I can't. Choirs, oh my gosh, like you're speeding up, you're slowing down because there's no internal pulse, there's no sensation. So getting rid of that choral stigma, but learning how to teach to get rid, right? How the internal flow, I think that Dr. Gordon, by pulling in flow and talking about the importance of it, because that is the baseline before you get to any pulse in music and talk about a macro, micro, or a fluid tempo. You must first have flow. So that to me, and I think that's my last reason for why music learning theory is the approach and theory to base your choral teaching on.
Cool. Yeah, like listening to stress the importance of harmonic audiation, listening harmonically. I think back to as an undergrad, I think I was a decent clarinet player. But I go back now and listen to recordings of the pieces that I played in recitals, for example, and I hear so much differently. I hear things that I never knew that were there in ways I never even imagined. Because yeah, like you said, listen. Well, when you're hanging on for dear life just to keep your own part going, when you're just imitating your own part, well, yeah.
And I
And I
think,
was,
oh, go
yeah,
ahead.
I was
I,
just about to say, sorry, we have a little lag. Go ahead.
you made me think of something that I planned on saying later, but I'll say it now, is that that's what I love about music learning theory is Dr. Gordon awakens our audiation and our listening in a way that will never stop. That we'll always continue to hear new things and we'll always continue, like it's never ending. So I love that you say, yeah, I listened to what I did, in undergrad and I hear it so differently. And 10 years from now, I bet you'll hear it differently again. That's the incredible part of music learning theory.
Right. Yeah, because I was just thinking about I can't remember why I was thinking about this, but it was in the episode on subjective tonality, how he would say what we audiate depends on what we have audiated in the past. So yeah, that speaks to your point of our audiation is always growing. Yeah. And that's why I think, I don't know about you, but personally, I've never been bored a day in my teaching life. Well, in meetings and stuff like that. Yeah. But in the actual teaching and the planning for teaching, I've never been bored because I am always being pushed musically.
Yes, for sure. And but you become very opinionated as it, to musical choices that composers make.
Mm.
I don't know if you've noticed that, but you start to think, well, for instance, I just really can't stand me musically, and my college students know it. I cannot stand a Picardy third anymore. I think, why
Me
would you
either.
ruin the most beautiful tonality? Why? Like it just, so there are things I
Yes.
feel and choices that, you in compositions and you teach them, no, like I'm ideating something different. And so it's so much fun, because you really, you start to have a conversation, a musical conversation that perhaps you would have never had before.
Yeah, that's so cool. One more thing, actually, that you got me thinking about. I don't know if you remember a few minutes back, you said something when you first started talking about the value of MLT in the choral world. You said something to the effect of, we were talking about improv and composition, something about, preparing for the performance. And I think you said in terms of MLT, like we just do the music and, we do harmonizing and we do improv and things. And then it's like, oh yeah, and here's the performance and we do it. And that just struck me because it sounds so different from, I think, the traditional ensemble process of how we spend our time, right? It's so focused on the performance because, let's face it, that is, part and parcel of being an ensemble music director, but just how much time is spent with the performance as the goal versus students' musicianship and musical growth as the goal. I think that's really striking. I don't know if you had any other thoughts on that.
Yeah, I thought of, yes, I I and I something about the product, right? Presenting a choral ottava, we'll call that the product, and that it's for performance based, and that's our traditional way of conducting an ensemble. And a lot of people in their K through 12 jobs that they need, they have to go to state and county assessments. So it's not something that they can walk away from. So depending on what job you have and where you're teaching, that might be something that you can never leave just because that's what you're getting paid to do and you're expected to do. I will say that oftentimes, though, there are warm up opportunities where you can present a warm up piece that is not like on the list of graded repertoire. I will tell you that through the creativity and the improvisation, which I tend to do a lot of it like at the end of warm-ups. In fact, I taught my pre-service teachers to always have improv or creativity in every warm-up at the end of the warm-up, at some point in time. Yes. So it can become a daily thing. But my first choir that I worked with at Southern Utah University, they were singing a Dorian tune from a GIA publication, and Roger Ames wrote modal melodies for a James Jordan series. And this Dorian tune, we were just singing it, and it was like our warm-up tune. And then we started to improvise and just make different choices, if you will, on this Dorian melody. And they began to love it so much, Heather, that we just thought, well, we have got to do this at the performance. We do. We have to. And I'm trying to think the yum ba da dee da 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 dum bum ba da dee da da. That's okay, but it gets even better because these so exploring these things and having your students then start to be creative, it awakens this teacher side of you that you never realized how important it is. Your students teach you their musicality. And this coolest thing is that then they thought, well, we have to perform it, so we need text, because they're choral animals, but we need text. And then within a second, hope is a thing with feathers. And let's try it. Hope is a thing with feathers that bump, right? And it fit.
And that is such a cool implicit generalization where probably nobody was thinking, oh, well, I don't know the poetry terms, like for meter, that kind of thing, but like the stress and where it falls, but just that implicit ability to be like, oh, I'm audiating and it seems to fit with this. That's so cool.
And we tried it out, and then we made a game. We made our game plan of, okay, well, we'll have the resting tone here. You'll hum this on the resting tone, then you'll do this. And then the first time through, we all sing the melody. And then the second time through, we start to add the improv, or I can't even remember the plan, right? Because we just made it together.
Yes.
It was an ensemble composition, and which I had never planned on doing it. I just thought I started with, let me expose them to a Dorian melody that's notated by Roger Ames. That was my number one. That was my number one mission. Okay. And then it just opened up. It flourished. And then I emailed Alec Harris at GIA, and I said, so like, I want to perform this and we want to do it this way. And like, do we have to pay money? Is this legal? Can I do this? Right. And he wrote back and said, if it's only for your educational purposes and your performance and you're not selling the recordings, do whatever you want. So it was just such, it's one of those moments. And so I think that as soon as when you start to dabble in these creativity, in the process of creativity, and you start to see how it opens and awakens your students, but then in turn feeds your own creativity and musicianship, you just don't ever go back.
Yeah. And you mentioned earlier thinking about that, guilt of, for a lot of teachers, looking at the national standards, but like just in describing that experience, if you sat down with a document outlining the national standards, think of how many you could check off.
And I really only set forth the goal and the objective, right, was immerse them and surround them in a Dorian tune. That was how it started. That was it.
But without, I think, did you say you that grew out of, you had used that tune as a part of the warm-ups?
Yes, that's when I introduced it. That's where I was introducing it, was at the end of the warm-ups. I would always, so that's how I started. When I first started, I just thought I just always need to put a non-major tune in my warm-up. That was like kind of my first foray into, I have to make sure I'm doing something every day that is expanding their musical and tonal vocabulary.
So, yeah, that's great. And I think that speaks to the power of when we aren't afraid to leave that space for those musical moments and those learning moments to happen. That's kind of what we lose when we're so focused on the performance. and that, drill and kill mindset, that's where we have trouble meeting the standards. But when we are focused on musicking with our students and making it rich, that's where the magic is. Yeah. So cool. Next question. If a choral teacher who didn't have experience with MLT wanted to start dabbling in some applications of MLT in their choral classroom, what might be one thing you think they could try in their teaching?
And that is my suggestion, is just pick one thing. I write this in our publication. I'm sure I say it a couple of times. Music learning theory, it has a lot. It is a lifetime of learning, and it's a lifetime journey. And so it's easy to just kind of shy away from it because of all of the sequences and the regulations and the skills. And, you kind of look at it and go, oh, no way. I'm happy with what I'm doing. I would say pick one thing, pick one element, and I say the word element purposefully. I feel like Dr. Gordon, he was very precise in his word choice when he did all of his publications. Pick one element that interests you, something that you hear. It could be, I'm just going to give them a Dorian tonality, right? Like I'm just going to teach them a tune in Dorian for the warm up. It could be, a lot of people, I think, gravitate to the learning sequence activities and the pattern work because they like having an assessment tool in the ensemble. And so a lot of people tend to go to that element. And that in itself is a great thing to learn. When you are giving your students those patterns, you are giving them vocabulary. And as they develop that vocabulary, that is then when they're able to eventually start creating their own words. So that's what I love about patterns. I think a lot of people think that it's like an element, oh, this skill doesn't belong in my collegiate ensemble. And when or doesn't belong in my middle school or high school program, but it depends on all. And that's the beauty of being a choral singer, or perhaps like the hardest thing of being a choral director is you can pick up singing whenever you want in life. So there's you don't have to make a music or a monetary investment in an instrument. You don't, so people just can walk into your choir at any time, at any level. And this is where the early childhood approach comes in, because they could be babbling and and you might start in some tonalities and babble as well. And this, if I could carry anything with Dr. Gordon, after I met him and after I told him, this is crazy, why can't I get certified in choir? What's going on? And he said, I really need someone to work with me on this. Would you work with me? And I actually started working with Dr. Gordon, and I flew to Columbia, South Carolina, where he lived 2 or 3 times to visit just with him. It was an incredible experience, and just talk choral applications with Dr. Gordon and Carol. I mean, it was I treasured those moments. But I think that he was so patient with me, Heather, because here I am. I have this graduate music degree, right? I had these high I'm in these high 4.3.9 GPA. Like I should have my stuff together. And music learning theory, if anything, it teaches you to be a humble musician. It teaches you to be humble, but at the same time, it empowers you. It's the dualistic approach that I love. And that's what all teaching and education should do. And so he just said to me over and over again, be patient with yourself. It will come. And I thought, if I'm at the feet of if I'm sitting in his living room with him and he's telling me it's going to be okay, it's going to be okay. So pick one thing. Getting back to answering your question, maybe it's the tonality work. That's actually what hooked me. Like being in your practical application afternoon sessions and being surrounded, and the early morning musicianship, being surrounded in all those tonal worlds, it just awakened my soul, right? Like it made me never want to sing in major ever again for the rest of my life. So that's really where I thought, well, I have to infuse these different tonalities into my singers' ears. But then also, or maybe you want to start with the creativity. Maybe improv is what interests you the most, and learning how to include improvisation into your practice. And in the end, you can always just surround them you can never stop oral, which is the beginning. You can never stop giving musical context to your singers. So even if you're just simply surrounding them in lots of songs and lots of different chants in various tonalities and meters, you could just start there. Just pick one thing to do. That would be my suggestion.
Excellent. Yes, I definitely agree. It can feel very overwhelming. And
Mhm.
I think too, actually not surprised to hear you say how patient Dr. Gordon was and to remind you like one thing at a time, because I'm sure he has seen, and you may have seen as well. I think for some people, they have a very different reaction to MLT than, we get excited and we're like, oh my gosh, I didn't know this was possible. And I think for whatever reason, we weren't stopped by how our shortcomings
Yes.
were exposed. That actually
Yes.
made us excited, like to get our students, to give them something that we didn't have. But I think for some people that's very intimidating.
Yes.
That feeling of, but I'm a musician, I'm making air quotes, I'm a musician and I'm good at music. I'm supposed to be good at music and know all this stuff. And now I'm exposed to these things that I have no idea what I'm doing. And that can be a really hard feeling for some people. They don't want to be in that feeling, and they just keep doing what they've been doing. Not to say there's anything wrong with what teachers
Mhm.
have been doing.
Sure.
It's not like MLT is everything,
Mhm.
but just staying with what feels safe.
And MLT certainly, and there are so many teachers, they do, I feel that they do want to enhance their training. They're going to these state conferences every year. They want new ideas. They want to invigorate or enhance, because you're exactly right. All of the traditional degrees and the traditional studies, there's a wealth of important information that we're giving to our students. So I just feel that a music learning theory can awaken and enhance those skills that perhaps we weren't developing because we just didn't know how to.
Totally. Yes. Um, and also I just want to say that I love how when you were talking about, I forget exactly how you were describing it, but just this idea of how it keeps us learning and growing. And whatever it was that you were saying really made me think of a quote from Dr. Gordon. I can't remember what book, probably Learning Sequences, but it's something to the effect of students learn best from teachers who are still learning. And I just love that. And I think that's kind of like at the heart of one of the points that you were just making. So thank you for that.
Yes.
Well, you have mentioned in passing a book that has recently come out that you co-authored with Jill Reese and Stuart Chapman Hill. It just came out over the summer. So congratulations. I'm so excited about this book, both because, as we've been talking about, it's so needed in terms of choral applications of MLT, but I'm also excited because it grew out of an initial idea that Jill had back when we did our Q&A book. That was Q&A for MLT, General Music Perspectives on Music Learning Theory. And I remember Jill saying, and like, this could be like a thing where like, there's an instrumental perspectives and there's a blah, blah. And now we have Q&A for MLT, choral music perspectives on music learning theory. So tell us a little bit about it. How did this collaboration come about?
Yeah, and I'm so thankful to Jill Reese for saying that, because there's no doubt in my mind that without Jill Reese, that this book would not have come to fruition. And I appreciate that she acknowledged that the choral needed to be next. Because I think it's that time. We'll talk a lot about this, but finally the choral track is awakened and it's alive, and we're starting to build an official community of choral MLT practitioners. So this is like, the timing couldn't be better on this. And as you said, it was based on your publication with Jill and Jennifer Bailey, and yours came out in 2021 and ours just came out. So man, Jill's working really fast on these. Yeah. So I this book was also kind of came around the same point in time when Dr. Taggart started forming a group of choral music learning theory practitioners to develop the choral track in GIML, which means that you can now take a choral level that's focused, which is really exciting. So our other lead contributing author, Stuart Chapman Hill, he was on the choral track committee with me. And he was also already working with Jill on the book. And so he kind of brought me into the book, which was really awesome. So that's kind of how that happened. It's like it's the synergy of things happening at the same time. So that's really how the book came together for us. And then, we planned and invited contributing authors, and there was an incredible framework that Jill had already brought to it and had planned out. And so that's how it started.
That is so exciting. So could you tell us a little bit about what is in the book? I will admit, I excitedly bought a copy at the conference back in August, and I just haven't had a chance to really dig in. But in flipping through, you have some stellar folks in that book. So could you tell us a little bit about maybe topics that are covered or certain contributors that you can think of that stand out in your mind?
Yes, and believe it or not, we had a framework, then more chapters. Oh, we need this chapter, we need that chapter. And then we didn't even do everything that we wanted to do. And then I said, there's a part two has to come, because we have 15 solid chapters in this book. And of course, as always, Jill gives this incredible backbone to the practicality of music learning theory. And so that is just running through the book, and that comes straight from her. And, it's so nice. You have to have Dr. Gordon's version of music learning theory. So you need his learning sequences in music, and having his word, nothing else stands. But it's so helpful to have other practitioners unpack the meaning of his words. And so Jill just does a wonderful job. We have a chapter on aptitude in the choral context. We have a sequential learning chapter that Jill wrote that's so helpful. We talk about learning sequence activities in the choral context. Stuart writes a chapter on choral warm-ups and how they can support audiation. Finally, I wrote a chapter about movement, which I've been dying to, talk about the importance of flow, really. That's something that I've just been on for a very long time. I also minored in dance in my undergraduate. So movement is like a part of me anyways, but to know how important it is in the development of training musicians and of audiating time and space. And Stuart Chapman wrote on that chapter with me. Jill wrote. Natasha Sigmund was a wonderful contributing author to the book. We talked about how MLT can inform choral rehearsal choices. A very exciting shout out I'd love to give is one of the contributing authors, Alex Byers, who teaches at Canyon View High School in Cedar City, Utah, was one of my master's students.
Aww.
And he did his final capstone project on music learning theory and on assessment in music learning theory. And I said, you have to share your story in this book. So that's an incredible thing that happened. We have so much in this book. There's a chapter that someone writes on just choosing your repertoire, but not only that, how do you arrange it and how do you write it? An incredible chapter. Joshua Palke and Lulu Kosic, they write this incredible chapter on diversity, equity, inclusion, and access in an MLT setting. And we talk about jumping right in. How do you just apply right away into the choral rehearsal? How are you going to do it? But probably my favorite is the informal learning chapters and the creativity and the improv chapters. And they actually come at the end. They're like chapters 12 and chapter 14. They're my absolute favorite. They really are. There's so much in the book. And what I would say to anyone who bought it is, don't go from 1 to 14 in order. Open it up. Look at the table. Seriously, look at the table of contents, and just find something that, oh man, that's something that I've wanted to do. Let me read about it, and just jump to where it is. It's such an incredible book. As you know, it's an easy read, but it's engaging, and it gives you things that you can just apply right away.
Terrific.
Yeah.
And just to let the listeners know, I will link to that book in the show notes. And also later on, I'll be mentioning a giveaway where you can win a free copy of the book. And it was interesting as you were giving us an overview. Thank you for letting us know that wide variety of topics. it even sounds like for a teacher who didn't give a rip about MLT, that they would still get so much out of this book, just in terms of thinking about, sequencing of instruction and choosing warm-ups and repertoire and DEI, all of that stuff. And then that got me thinking of, those teachers who maybe don't give a rip about MLT, or maybe they're skeptical. Maybe what they've heard about MLT is kind of what you mentioned, which sadly that happens a lot, I think, because there's some folks who don't really understand MLT and they just make assumptions about what it is. And that's where it's just patterns. It's just memorizing patterns, or it's just rote songs, always rote. So that's sad, but it got me thinking about that, even if you're skeptical, you don't have to fully buy into this. But there's still some things that you can take away that can help your students. What advice might you give, or things to think about might you say to a choral teacher or any teacher who's skeptical about MLT?
You made me think about, first of all, when you said something a couple of sentences ago, you're reminding me of a student that I had at Southern Utah University who was a very difficult student. Difficult meaning wonderfully difficult, that he pushed me and just this intuitive thinker who always wanted to go 5 steps beyond. And sometimes they need to be where we have them, but and it was like the highest compliment. And I had this student obviously in choral ensembles and all my conducting classes and all my methods, because when you're the choral music ed person, you have them for everything. And this student decided to pick up this elementary certification that was an optional thing at Southern Utah University. And I taught a general music class in the summer. So this student was taking that class in the summer. And my version of general music is all music learning theory based. And then it's a summer class, so it was really jam packed. It's like a 7-8 week course. You know how they teach them that have a lot of hours in them, but they're jam packed. And so I give, like 2 weeks of co-diet, 2 weeks of Del, 2 weeks of Orff. Like I did all of those for a couple of weeks, but MLT ran through the whole course. And this student, who I know we've all had a student like this, said, "This is the best music class I've had in my degree. This is the most meaningful. This is the most I've ever learned." And so I thought, oh my God, wow, that it just, as a teacher, that makes you, but it didn't come from me. It didn't come from us, right? It came from, thank you, Dr. Gordon. Thank you for giving me the content that makes it's like, we didn't have to tell it for him to say that. He had been through, he said that as a junior. So he had been through all his theory sequence, his oral skills sequence. We know the deal with a music ed major. So I thought that was really wonderful. To someone who is a skeptic or just apprehensive, one of the biggest things that we all learn actually is that we grow as musicians the moment that we start this journey of music learning theory teaching. So I mean, it will improve. If you ever thought you might not even know that your musicality can grow. And that's what I would say, is to look at it in a positive way. It's not what you don't know. Because yes, the music, I think I mentioned it earlier in our talk, that as an undergraduate, you're kind of broken down, and sometimes you think you're like in survival mode. It's true. You become very scared, and you're only trained to do exactly what this one studio teacher thinks what they audiate, and you only sing what your choral director audiates. And then so really, like, if you think about it, this is horrible to say, but the entirety of our music studies, really, we're like performing of others, the audiation of others. We're trained to perform them exactly how they audiate.
Just to interject just for a quick second, because it didn't feel good. It looked like it didn't feel good to say that. Like, looking at your face, listeners can't see you. I can see you.
I know.
But I think traditionally that is so true, especially in ensemble music programs. In one of my previous research studies, it was on an undergraduate student who was a phenomenal musician, super smart, like stellar potential. And he changed his plans from wanting to be a band director to wanting to teach elementary general music. And I don't think this was his original analogy. I think he heard it from someone else, but he likened it to the ensemble is like an organ. And the director is up there essentially like pressing the keys, like the French horns are a key and the clarinets are a key. And like it's the ensemble playing the instrument, and the instrument is, or I'm sorry, the director is playing the instrument and the instrument is the ensemble. So all the music is coming from the director's audiation. And then sort of it doesn't feel good to say, but it's sort of like the students are just, the means to make it happen. They're not always involved, thoughtfully in the process.
And then to think that when you, as I did, when you commit to get your choral degree or your master's degree in conducting, that's what you're doing, is you're trained maybe perhaps to make everyone else, how can I show my audiation with my gesture in the best way so that they all perform what I am audiating? You realize, oh my gosh, this was all about me. And then you go, well, who is this supposed to be about? Is it supposed to be about me, or is it supposed to be about the students and what they take with them? To realize that my high school students, okay, the altos knew all of the correct rhythms and pitches in Handel's Hallelujah Chorus. That's great. Well, what did that do for them? Now, yes, whenever they hear it happen, hopefully they're singing the alto part, for the rest of their lives. But could I have given them more? Yeah, I know I could have. And it's not like, coming back to, it's not what you don't know, because yes, like automatically the barricades come up because we've taught to be these little like caged musicians, and we get so worried about the judgment of our musicianship. So we think, oh, I don't know that, and I don't know that, and so I won't go there. But it's not about what you don't know. We have to look at it as like, what will we learn? What will we learn through this music learning theory journey?
Yeah.
The skeptics, that's what I would say. And the one thing is, you are learning when you start, you are learning with those students right then and there. That's part of the acceptance. You will not, you'll have some ideas, and you'll get some procedures and some sequences, but you're on the ground, like learning with those students. And what's incredible is just how much they teach us, right?
Yes, 100%.
Yep.
Now, if we are willing to embrace the messiness and the vulnerability, and to not always be expected to be the expert who knows all the answers, but just to follow where the students lead, try something. And if it's a hot mess, well, know that your students trust you enough to pick up the pieces and move on.
And that's when we grow. That's what we learn, right? Whenever we have those challenging moments or those epic failures there, we all know, when we've read Dr. Gordon and his feelings on like the non-existence of pentatonic, for instance, and right. And so when you think about like, let's remove the bars on the Orff instruments so that there are no bad sounds coming out, like that. Once again, that's another conversation, but I don't hear bad sounds, and maybe I'm somehow distantly related to Charles Ives. And I actually, and I remember you doing an improv session with us now in South Carolina, and I improved, and you said, Krystal, that was such a lovely dissonance. And I thought, what are you talking, here I was just exploring, but we never know what our students will hear, and we never know what they'll make. And who says, because I tell my students all the time, if you want to sing Eric Whitacre and the likes of all of this contemporary choral sound, these chords don't ring without dissonance, right?
Yeah.
So, that's something too that I think is important to layer in as a choral MLT person, is not only to be teaching, tonic and dominant and focusing on that and the tonality of the chords, but start layering in the dissonance so that they hear it and they own it and they love it. And then when it pops up on the page, oh yeah, I have that, and I'm sure that we would come up with a different word for dissonance, because it could be brilliance, really. Right?
Yeah. And that's why I'm hoping, as you told that story, I totally don't remember that. And I hope, thinking now, what I would hope the spirit of that is, I think it's so cool when you hear a student do something and then you can see on their face if it was intentional or not. And I'm hoping that what I said was, I wanted to highlight for the others, like I could see on your face that was intentional and that was really freaking cool.
Yeah.
Right? And
yes.
I
will tell you that, no, I did not I know I did not purposefully make a choice I was not a troublemaker, and my audiation was not developed at that point. I can't remember, we could have been a Mixolydian or Dorian. It doesn't matter, but no, I did not think, oh, that I'm going to be the troublemaker, which I call them the troublemakers now. And I say, I want you to add some trouble, like
That's cute.
spice, like put some spice in our tonal life, right? But no, I did not intend to do it. And it was a compliment, and like it was an empowerment, because the way you said it, I went, oh my gosh, I was audiating
Yeah. Well, like, it makes me
so
think, okay, maybe we were in Phrygian, because one of my favorite things in Phrygian is like
could have
when
been.
you have a Phrygian song and there's like tonic happening, but also
Yes,
and you get like that
yes,
crunchy
yes.
half step. Yeah, I love that. Good. And also, I don't want to make it seem like when it's not intentional that that's a bad thing either, because
Yeah.
Gordon would say there are no wrong notes. There's,
Yeah.
there's no wrong choices. And then also it gives us valuable information as a teacher, just for us to know, oh, that's not in that student's audiation yet. Cool.
Yeah, yeah,
What they
yeah,
might need. So just for
yeah.
the listeners, I don't want them to think that there was judgment there.
No, no, not at all. And in fact, a lot of what I write, a lot of the exercises that I do, like I said, I intentionally put, if you'll call them non-chord tones, I intentionally embed those, and I make those moments, because it is very important in the choral world for them to have that, and to feel the love of it. And it's so funny, because as soon as my students sing it, and you always hear a hesitation and a timidness, and then as soon as you acknowledge the beauty of it, and then they start to sing into it, oh, it just comes to life. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. As a band person, like that sounds completely like Granger in the band world, where you
Yeah.
have those crunchy parts that at first you're like, oh, that sounds wrong. And then
Uh-huh.
it's fully sunk into your audiation, then you can really like,
Yep.
yeah, good stuff. You mentioned earlier in passing, I think when you talked about working with the group on the book, you mentioned that there was a group of folks who were working on establishing a choral track for GIML, the Gordon Institute for Music Learning, and that is now officially a thing. We offer 2-week professional development levels courses, otherwise known as PDLCs, in the summer, 2-week courses in different locations around the United States. Previously only in early childhood, elementary, general, instrumental, and piano, but just this past summer, GIML offered the very first choral PDLC. And so I was wondering if you could just tell us a little bit of that process with that working group of choral folks, what that was like. How'd you all come together and come up with these ideas?
Yay, this is so super exciting. I feel like we're on the GIML map. Woohoo! So Dr. Cindy Taggart really led the charge, but I'm sure along with input from other board members and other GIML faculty and practitioners that she has worked with for years. And so they really did a wonderful job of pulling together this diverse group of practitioners. We all had different grade level teaching. We all have been through different levels, as most of us have. I think all of us had a level, whether mine was in elementary, was in general music. We had early child, and I think we just had early child and elementary levels experience. Many different, it combined all of our years of teaching in the music learning theory lens was incredible. We also had MLT certified, we had GIML faculty members too. So, and I think we had 3 GIML faculty members. So it was it was a wonderful combination of folks, and I am forever indebted to them for the work that they did. It was a year-long process, and really more probably a year and a half. By the time Dr. Taggart started things, and we ran, and then by the time I put the final package together and we were approved, it took about a year and a half. We worked every month for a year, and I quickly made small work groups. So we had an LSA work group, and we had a musicianship, a creativity and improv musicianship work group, and then we had a warm up and repertoire work group. And they would meet bi-weekly every month, and then once a month we would all come together together and talk about where we were. And we had, I have this amazing folder in my Google account that is just full of like resources and tons of resources and tons of teaching ideas and warm-up ideas. And, there was a lot that came forward and many, many fruitful conversations. And then, when you have a group like that, that probably one of the most challenging things is keeping this moving forward. Right? Because you have all of these, you have to move forward and you have to eventually compromise and to reach that final product of here is our syllabus for you. Would you please approve it so that we can begin the journey, knowing that it will be revised very quickly. And that we know in the collegiate world, especially in academia, it's so hard to just say, just commit, put words down on the paper, right? We've got to commit and we've got to move forward. And then, yes, like once it starts, this will have a mind of its own. And then our students will really tell us what they need and what they expected and how we can revise it and to make it every year, to make it the best thing and what our students need. So yeah, that's kind of how it worked. And like I said, I'm forever thankful they worked so hard. And so it was a wonderful experience.
Oh, that is so cool. I'm just thinking of that folder of all those resources. I see more books coming in the future, maybe, or other resources.
Yes.
Go ahead.
No, and I was going to say, and that was part of what we talked about. And that's why the Q&A book has a lot of those same folks that were on the committee contributing to, and you're right, there's so much more to come. And I forgot to say that I know Dr. Gordon would I'd be beyond proud. That was, he always wanted to see that this part come to life, the choral world come to life. So I know that he is like we're just all thrilled that now we are on the GIML map, as I said.
Yes, and I can also attest that he would be very proud. I remember when I first met you in that professional development levels course, how he would talk so much about how we needed more choral trainings and things. And so I know he would be so happy that it's out there in the world. And congratulations. I know that in that very first choral PDLC, you interned to become GIML faculty. So congratulations on joining the GIML faculty as a choral applications faculty member.
Thank you. It's an incredible honor. It really is. I can't say enough about, when you spend, like I said, I started probably working with Dr. Gordon 12 years ago, but was, so it's been about 15 years or so that music learning theory has been a part of my life as an educator and a choral director. So yeah, and I'm not done, which is the best part. So thank you. I just feel fortunate and very honored.
Excellent. Really briefly, could you tell the listeners about what it's like to be in a PDLC, both or either in general or specifically in terms of choral? What could a person expect if they were to sign up for a PDLC?
Yeah, I wrote these first of all, I just said it's the most wonderful journey. It feeds your musical soul. It really, I said it's recharging, it's inspiring, it's invigorating. I just can't say enough on either end, whether you're a participant or you're a faculty member. It's just an incredible opportunity. You can be musical with these other musical nerds, if you will. Right? So often we're in our schools and we're kind of segregated to the noisy place of the right, because we make the noise, so we've got to put them far away. And it just awakens and engages you as a music educator. In the choral track, as in all the other tracks, you're going to do the same thing in the morning as we would do with all the other ones. You're going to have your musicianship, you're going to have your theory in the morning. And the great part about when we premiered and when we did the first one this summer was we also had general music participants, and we also had instrumental music participants. So that's really nice too. If you're able to get to one where there's multiple tracks occurring at the same time, that boosts your learning, because then in the morning you hear other perspectives of what's going on. So that's super incredible. We had 3 different tracks. So the learning that you get in the morning you can't beat it. And then I felt like you eat lunch and then you come in the afternoon. I was so lucky to intern with Andy Mullen, who was the first teacher of the first choral track. And so in the afternoon, I quickly found that we had to unpack a lot of the questions from the morning. And so I think if I could boil down what happens in the afternoon, it's a lot of unpacking the questions that you have in your mind, but within a choral community and within a choral context. So you're unpacking these ideas and you're saying, well, this is what it's going to look like, which is why it's called practical applications in the afternoon. But the fruitful conversations, once again, with the same people who are on that journey, you can't get better than that in the moment. To be learning something, to get the lecture, and then to come in the afternoon. We did a lot of music making together in the afternoon, which, as we know, experiential learning is the most important thing. And Dr. Gordon knew that. So we did a lot of music making. We always started with our warm-ups. We did a lot of creativity improvisation. There's a lot of peer teaching and peer practice coaching that I think is really important, especially as you're working on your LSAs and how to deliver them in a way that you feel safe and you feel prepared and ready to. The peer coaching. And I have learned in the collegiate setting that if a student or a peer says something, it's much more impactful than if it comes from like the teacher. So I don't think you can beat what happens in the afternoon session with the peer learning that occurs and the questions. Yeah. So
Yeah, that's excellent. And I just I'm tickled by this, so I just have to share one of the participants that was in the course actually emailed me during one of the first few days of the course and I think the subject line in the email was something like, I'm here in the US taking this course and it's all your fault or something, because he had really started to get into music learning theory because of the podcast. And I just thought that was so cool that, we start with our little baby steps, and then eventually maybe we are ready to make that leap and really dig into more intensive training. So I just thought that was cute.
yes, that's wonderful.
Well, I don't want to keep you too much longer. So to wrap up, I was wondering if you could share from these different experiences working in the group that created this choral PDLC track, or in the actual course this summer, or maybe in working with folks on your Q&A for MLT book. What is one thing you could think of that you have learned from any of these collaborators, or maybe something they shared that surprised you?
I have something that I think it's an improvisation activity. And that's really, I tried to do a lot of creativity and improvisation in our first choral track. And it came from the book. I went to the chapter on improvisation and creativity, and I pulled this incredible sequence that I just loved, and I taught it, and I felt like it worked so well. So I wanted to share that because it really got me excited about having a sequence, how to prepare students to improv. So the activity is called the unfinished song. And many of you were probably familiar with it, finish the phrase or complete my phrase. And this comes from Amy Pearsall's writing in the book, and she's at the University of Delaware on faculty there, and Dr. Pearsall, newly Dr. Pearsall. So she talks about, you want to give a melody, and then you say, oh wait, we have to change the second half. The producer, the editor, they don't like the second half, so we have to change the melody. But there is this incredible sequence that they give in the chapter that I gave in the choral track, and I just love it. So number one, what I would say to do, I would add a pre-sequence is, I think it's important for the teacher to model finishing new melodies, first of all, before you even get into the student owning it, just so that they hear it. And then, you sing something and then you say, oh, I can do something different and I can do something different. So once that's done, like say, for instance, if I did the fly, 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 fly. That was my melody. And then I said, well, let me take the first half. Fly, 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 fly. Oh, and I have to rewrite it. The second half I have to rewrite. Fly, fly. So just demonstrating that. And then taking the students into this right away, the choral track participants were on to writing their new melodies. And this is something to think about too, which once again is another conversation, that things will move way faster at a PDL, right? And
Mm.
they'll move way, yeah, they'll move way faster. So when you're in the classroom, you might have to do more modeling and just more surrounding before then you start with this sequence that's this money sequence for the unfinished song. So number one, just giving the students the opportunity to audiate a new ending so that you sing fly, 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 and they go into audiation. You just point to your head and then they finish it. Then the second step actually comes from Jill Reese. And she said the next thing to do is to put them in a sound booth. So you turn them away from the choir, or you have them find like their own little place in the room in the choral ensemble rehearsal. And you say, okay, so now you're in your sound booth, and I'm going to sing the first half, and then you sing what you audiated in your sound booth. Then the third step, and this is the best step, is the cacophony of improvisation, where you have them turn back around from their sound booth and just make it all together. Now, it is fruitful to have that space in the room. The more you can spread them out, the better, because then the sound it'll just be, they'll have that space to audiate what's happening around them. And then the fourth thing that you can do is you can then start to have particular rows or particular groups of singers share their new endings at the same time. So we're really scaffolding this to eventually get to the fifth step, which is where you're offering individuals the opportunity to contribute their new ending. So it's so much, to have that sequence, which, like I said, my prep is teacher surround and show them what it even means to do that a lot. But to have that sequence, we would just say, okay, now we're going to finish it. Let's go. But there's 5 steps now in there to really create a safer space for students. And I think you always have, if you're lucky, you might have that 1 or 2 that are ready to go. They don't need that. But I think you're going to find you're going to have much more positive experience and much more impact and engagement if you go through. And I just love that the first step is audiate it first. That's the most important thing, is that you're thinking it before you start to make it, so that once you start to contribute with your voice, it's a meaningful contribution. It's one that you've thought about.
I actually wanted to ask, because I do and have written about something similar that I do, where when I'm having students improvise melodies for the first time, at least, I will give them that time to just think their ideas silently, and then to explore by coming up with creating and singing their ideas as a group, and then to individuals. But I find the sound booth step really intriguing. I think I could predict the purpose of that, but could you just quickly unpack that for us? What is the goal of the sound booth step?
So the purpose of the sound booth, and this comes straight from Jill Reese's idea, is that they have time so they can imagine their own safe space. And this is me unpacking Jill's thoughts. So I'm sure she would say it differently, but it's almost like you're creating a private bubble in the choral ensemble, where you just have that private bubble where we're just, and it kind of reminds me of the holding your ear while you're singing, because you need to hear yourself, right? Like singers make sound booths a lot anyways. Or in Westminster Choir College, we used to just warm ourselves up. Like we would get into a new venue, and I thought it was kind of brilliant. And Dr. Flimmerfelt would just go, okay, go and warm up. And everyone would find their own little corner, and they would do all of their warm-ups from their own vocal studio. And it was just this time where you just go and you just bring from your head, you bring it out, but you do it in your own little safe space and bubble first, before then you're acknowledging, okay, I'm going to contribute to the whole ensemble. I think that's the purpose of it, that even it'd be lovely to have those practice rooms, those little like real sound booths and all. But I love the acknowledgement of, let's first work out, like bring it out of your mind and put it into your instrument, which is your voice first, before then we bring it to the ensemble.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's so cool. It sounds like twofold, where part of it is in their sound booth, they hopefully, if they're focused on this little bubble, they're less distracted by all the other sounds going on around them. And then also maybe less self-conscious of, oh, these sounds are coming out of my mouth for the first time. Maybe I don't know what's going to happen. And it's, like you said, that kind of safe little space. Very cool. I love that. Well, I am so excited to go downstairs and grab my book, because I want to start really sitting down and digging into some of these chapters. Well, this has just been fantastic. Krystal, thank you so much for making the time. I learned a lot. I know listeners will learn a lot, and hopefully check out some of the great resources that we have talked about.
And I learned a lot too. I mean, that's, you can't beat just getting together and talking with people about this. And you always come away with new ideas and are eager to get back in the ensemble.
Yes. And I will be giving more details about this and the giveaway before I wrap up the episode. But I did also want to give a heads up for listeners who are GIML members or might want to become GIML members. We're so excited to have you on the GIML faculty, and you will be offering some different trainings throughout this year in your role as GIML faculty. I know you'll be doing one of the GIML faculty hangouts later this school year, where folks can just show up and ask you questions, pick your brain. And then also later in, I think, the winter to spring timeline, you're going to be doing an online workshop, a 3-hour workshop on choral applications of MLT. So I'm so excited, and I will definitely keep listeners updated on when those things will be happening.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you, Krystal. It's been fantastic. Well, I hope you enjoyed listening to that conversation with Krystal McCoy. I had a great time chatting with her. It was so fun to catch up and hear about all the exciting things going on in the world of choral music and MLT. I also wanted to mention that in our chat, Krystal mentioned a resource that was a James Jordan publication that also had a lovely little Dorian melody in it. I did track down what that publication is, and I'll link to that in the show notes in case you want to check it out. Okay, let's get to the giveaway. If you would like to win a free copy of the brand new Q&A for MLT choral music applications of music learning theory, you have a few different ways to enter. And they all involve sharing one of your suggestions. We want to hear an idea from you for a simple warm-up that could also facilitate audiation-based goals. This might be an exercise in a tonality beyond major tonality, or maybe something with a simple bass line or a little harmony part. Anything that could be used to further students' audiation in addition to warming up their voices. Once you have your idea ready, and again, it does not have to be anything elaborate or fancy or anything that requires a lot of MLT knowledge, just anything at all that could help develop students' audiation in addition to warming up voices. Once you have your idea ready, you can enter by doing one of these 3 things. Number 1, you can share your idea in a post on Facebook, and be sure to tag the Everyday Musicality Podcast Facebook page so that I can see your entry. Option number 2, if you want to enter the giveaway, you can share your idea on any social media platform that you're on and email me a screenshot of your post. I only have a Facebook page for the podcast, so I don't have the ability for you to tag a podcast account in any other social media platform, unfortunately. And option number 3 to enter the giveaway, if you don't use social media or you don't want to post this on social media, you can simply email me your idea for a choral warm-up that could be used to build audiation by sending it to everydaymusicality@gmail.com. I'll put those 3 ways to enter in the show notes to this episode so that you can go back and look them over later. However, you might want to enter this giveaway for a free copy of that brand new choral applications of MLT book, just be sure to get your entry in by Sunday, October 22nd. I'll be delaying the next episode of the podcast to 3 weeks from today instead of my usual 2 weeks because I'll be in Germany having lots of fun. And I don't drink beer, but I hear they have good wine in Germany, maybe some Riesling. So my plan is to announce the winner of the giveaway in the next episode that will be out on October 24th. Also, I'm hoping to share the warm-up ideas that I receive in that episode, giving credit, of course, to the folks who submit them using first name only. So I hope you'll enter the giveaway by October 22nd and share your idea for a warm-up that could be used to build audiation so that all of us can expand our toolbox for using MLT in the choral setting, myself included, with your help. In the meantime, if you have questions, comments, or suggestions for future episodes, please get in touch. You can email me or send me a voice memo at everydaymusicality@gmail.com. I would love to hear from you. Thanks for listening, and let's keep musicking every day.